Hello, Alessandrina here, and today I'm going to talk about going against the grain of our conditioning and why it's important to understand that process and to work with it and how to work with it. So, whoever you meet, whatever you do in your life, it's likely that at some point or another you will encounter people, situations, circumstances that are going to chafe, that are not going to feel good, that are going to have either a heaviness to them or a sense of contraction and constriction, maybe even a lack of energy or vitality, something that really just doesn't feel good. And in those moments, we can react to what we feel and imagine that something is problematic, that whatever it is in the environment that we then associate with how we feel is causing this to happen, is leading us to feel uncomfortable or in a state of pain or suffering even. And so in those moments, if we can recognize that what is actually getting triggered and what is actually happening is that we're going against the grain of our conditioning. And that as we go against the grain of our conditioning, so we're doing something, saying something, interacting with someone, making certain choices in our life that are not matching up to what our parents or ancestors or the collective consciousness as a whole, it doesn't match, it doesn't map to what they say is right, to what they say is good, to what they say is safe. And therefore, in that moment, there's going to be internally this feeling of not being safe. And again, we might not realize that that's what is happening, that we are feeling unsafe with the situation, the person, the circumstance, based not on reality, not on a true threat, simply based on what we've been conditioned to believe and to understand about the world and reality and ourselves and others. So once we have this understanding that anytime that we get into a state of negative thought, negative emotion, in a state of limitation, of perceived lack, that something in the environment is triggering in us a feeling, an emotion, an energy, a fear, a belief, and that in that moment we feel like we are not safe. We are going against the grain of our conditioning. We're doing something outside of that context that seemed to have been safe and was modeled as safe. Now, there's great opportunity once we recognize that that's what's happening and that it's not actually an external person, object, circumstance that's causing us to feel how we feel. And so now the opportunity is to work on the conditioning. It doesn't mean that the situation or what is arising will be engaged in the way that it's arising or that it's coming to us, meaning that, if someone is triggering in us a certain feeling or emotion, and they also have a process that is also based on conditioning, then it's about finding a way to navigate that and to be able to communicate and to really come together and understand each other, so that then there can be some capacity to operate on the same level and to understand what each person is communicating, and then working to find a common ground. and to operate from that common ground together. So this is in the context of relationship. Oftentimes when we get triggered in the context of a relationship, we can feel like something's wrong with the relationship, with the partner, instead of recognizing that actually what's happening is our conditioning. We're going against the grain of our conditioning. We're being challenged in our conditioning, which is a wonderful thing, because the more we can let go of our conditioning and accept what is and see what is and operate within the context of what is, whatever that might be, without judgment, without expectation, without belief, without fear, then there's a greater capacity to create and to engage and to connect and to harmonize and to remain in balance. So one simple practice that you can begin to implement in your daily life that can be very helpful is to identify some of your core triggers, the things that keep coming up in your life, and interpretations you've made about those things that keep coming up in your life. Whether you've said, people are bad, or I'm not loved, I'm not cared about, I'm not supported. All the ways in which in the past, when that has come up, you've made a certain interpretation about it, and then essentially continued to imagine that what you were experiencing inside of yourself was a result of the external. And then remaining victimized and entangled with that which is external to you, instead of finding within your own self peace with the trigger and resolving your conditioning, so that whatever happens on the outside is not a source of distress and anxiety or worry or pain or suffering. So when you start making such a list of the different triggers that you have, and then becoming aware of interpretations that you've made, and then releasing those interpretations, so healing them, transmuting them, because without doing that, there will still be energy there from all the different perspectives and interpretations you've made in the past. They will continue to exist because you haven't yet processed them out. So if you forgive each interpretation, for instance, using, for instance, the forgive and forget process, or if you use another tool that is going to transmute those different prior interpretations and recordings that you've made about reality, then that can go away. It's like the neural pathways begin to be erased, released, and now new neural pathways can be created. And so once you release the interpretations, you can then ask yourself, within the context of all of these different situations, well, what am I believing? What am I expecting? What am I judging? What am I fearing? And if you ask yourself any of those questions, in any of those situations where you get triggered, you will find that there is a belief, there is a fear, there is an expectation or a judgment, and therefore that actually what's getting triggered is your conditioning. That all of that belief, fear, expectation, judgment is just a result of your conditioning. Everyone is going to have different fears, different beliefs, different expectations, different judgments, and everyone is going to navigate the world until they've resolved all ego. That's all part of the ego, based on that. So whenever a fear gets triggered, they're going to feel a certain way. Whenever a certain belief is not matching up to the reality that they're experiencing, they're again going to feel a certain way. Whenever they have an expectation and it doesn't get met in the world, they're going to feel a certain way. And the same is true if something happens that doesn't meet someone's expectation or is generating fear in their system, then they can, as a process of attempting to control the situation, they can go into judgment of themselves, of others, of the situation. So when we ask those questions and we start to map what our beliefs, our fears, our expectations, judgments are in those situations that are triggering to us, then we can also apply a process of transmutation, of releasing the beliefs, the fears, the expectations, the judgments, realizing we don't need the ego to navigate reality, to live in the world in a wholesome and harmonious fashion, which is what is going to bring about the best results when we are wholesome and we realize our oneness and our unity with all beings, and we're able to harness all of that which comes from this realization and this connection. Then life gets a lot better. So we feel a lot more connected and grounded, and there's more capacity for deeper relationships and a deeper relationship with ourselves. And our beliefs, our fears, expectations, and judgment, they don't help us, even though the ego may want to continue to keep that illusion alive, for us to feel that, within the realm of our ego, we're going to be safe, and that it's better to operate like that. Anyone who has looked at throughout the history of mankind, all of the different things that we've lived through, and if you look at your own life experience, you will most likely recognize that your ego is at the core of all pain and all suffering. So the opportunity here with this process is to make an account of all of the things that you've interpreted about reality, beliefs, expectations, judgments, and fears, and all of the ways in which that causes pain, suffering, discontent, discomfort. And when you do that, and you really clear those energies, you transmute those energies by choice, through your own free will choice of recognizing that your life is much better without them, then the conditioning and the ways in which going against the grain of your conditioning, well, that kind of becomes an old story. It's not something that you're preoccupied with anymore. You're not so focused on trying to keep that alive, because you're now operating from a different state of consciousness that is less ego-driven, more really just being able to connect in a way that is present time, rather than from the past and all the ways in which the past generates the conditioning, right? So the conditioning is the past. It's what our parents and ancestors have believed would keep them safe. And then when until we get to the point where we can release that conditioning, we continue subconsciously, not really realizing that we're doing that, to operate from that same conditioning, which is the past. So instead of creating in the present moment, the future, we're just continuously living in the past and projecting the past onto the present moment and the future, and therefore just replaying out the same things over and over again. So this is just a reflection I wanted to share with you that I thought could be very useful in the context of relationship dynamics, especially because when we realize that much of our conflict and our discontent in relationship really comes from going against the grain of our conditioning, then we can come together as partners in whichever context of relationship you're in. You can come together and really begin to understand one another and understand the shaping of each one of your conditioning, and also working through it so that it doesn't feel like that anymore. So it's not so painful, and it's more constructive and productive, and brings about the kind of results that you're wanting in the context of relationship. Not to say that we can control that, just to say that whatever it is that we intend, if we work together towards it rather than blame each other's conditioning, or in whichever way feel victimized by each other's conditioning, then when we stop doing that, blaming or feeling victimized, then we can really start to work as a team. I hope this is helpful. Sending you much love.